Hello, and welcome as always to our podcast. I'm Steve Henning, your host, and thanks again for joining us. Today, we've got a really special guest. Many of you probably already recognize the gentleman on screen here, but for those of you that don't, it's Will Brogan from Commercial Truck Training. And actually, Commercial Truck Training, if you didn't know, is powered by OneNexus. I think we'll talk a little bit about that today, probably. But Will is the Commercial Truck Training strategist. Number of years, obviously, in the space, lots of good knowledge. And Will, maybe if you would just introduce yourself to everyone, share whatever you think you'd like to start with, and we'll sort of dive in from there.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me, Steve. Looking forward to this. We've done some, we called them webinars back then, pre-COVID, I suppose. I know the podcast certainly existed then, but we would do webinars back then. But yeah, I've been involved with commercial truck training since early 2013. Worked for Ken Taylor for a long time, of course, founded Commercial Truck Training, and stayed that way for about a decade, stepped away for a bit and worked for Nissan for a couple of years, and then eventually found my way back when OneNexus reached out to us about acquiring Commercial Truck Training and shifting it into kind of a new era, and asked me to come in and lead that process. So Ken Taylor, who is still involved, and by the way, a Automotive Fleet Hall of Fame nominee this year.
Fantastic.
Great. Yep.
We're going to vote for him and root for him.
Yeah. So he's still involved a little bit, although more of a kind of an overseer type capacity. And I'm running the show for Nexus as one of our three divisions, at least in the United States. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that's great. And congrats to Ken on that nomination.
Yeah, absolutely. Well earned. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. So let's maybe start with the acquisition and talk about, from a training consulting perspective, what's changed or what's expanded, or just sort of what has that experience been like?
Yeah, so there's a couple parts to it, and the first is I suppose the experience that Ken and I had, where kind of everything was going well until COVID, and we actually had plans to, I believe the date was July 4th of 2021, which would have been Ken's 70th birthday. That was going to be our transition date, and to me, taking over, bringing somebody else in to do what I used to do, taking over his role, etc. And COVID didn't actually change things that much for us, but the fallout from everything did. The shortages and the inventory changes and all that. It really, we heard we don't have any trucks. We're not paying for any training quite a bit through our processes. And that led me to kind of have to look elsewhere, and worked for Nissan for a few years, and that was great. And then OneNexus reached out to us, because what OneNexus has done and really made their mark in the US is twofold. One was the BDM program for General Motors that still exists today, although it's taken a little bit of a different face. And then they really stepped in and helped with the fleet cycling process, with GM involved and some of the other components of that. And they grew really well. And they also had a hiring and recruiting division. And so what they were finding was, bringing people into these fleet departments, running hiring and recruiting and getting people involved, there was a big gap in foundational principles before you could really start talking the detail of cycling. And they reached out to Ken and myself. Actually, it was almost a year ago today. We're doing this on the 12th. I think it was on the 20th of August last year. And started that process. And what does this look like? How does it benefit everybody? And we found that, that perfect match and made it happen. And I'm very, very happy to be a part of it.
Well, that's awesome. That's a great story too. I love it. And it's a little funny, right? We look back, and there's a lot of stories, surrounding COVID and the pandemic and so forth, that are not very positive. But then there's the flip side of that. There's a lot of really interesting, people that launched a business or pivoted, or whatever the case might be. And believe it or not, some really good things came out of it. So.
Yeah, I remember when all of that kind of happened, and you had those couple of weeks where it was like, what's going to go on? But I kept having that mindset of, at some point, this will make me and everybody else stronger. Yeah. Right. It's finding that avenue and staying patient for that to happen and ready. And it took a little longer than anybody wanted, I'm sure, but myself included. But we are here.
Yeah. We were probably all looking at it going, oh, maybe, maybe a few weeks, a month or two.
Right.
Okay. Or a few years,
Yep.
so be it. So you said something a minute ago, and I remember this, and like you, I speak with a number of commercial managers, general managers, dealer principals, etc. And there was a time when, quite frankly, it was either order taking with people calling a dealership saying, "I'm looking for this truck. Do you have any?" And frequently, it was also being the bearer of bad news, and "Gosh, I'm really sorry, we have zero inventory, and I don't know when we're going to get anything." And fast forward to today, and all of a sudden, many dealerships now have a lot of inventory, maybe more than they want, which takes us back to the days of prospecting, if you will. And if you look at the automotive space in general, it's fairly cyclical. I think anybody that's been part of it probably recognizes that. But now we're back to the days of prospecting. And I gotta believe that there's a fair amount that you're doing, and you and Ken and so forth, just with, hey, let's get back to the basics. Let's talk about how we prospect, how we communicate, what that looks like. And also looking at it from a technology perspective, what can we do, or what are the tool sets that we have available that can help with that? Is that even remotely accurate? Are you starting to have those kind of conversations now?
Oh yeah. In fact, one of the things that we're really pushing is, I would throw something in there that adds to all that, is that time management.
Yeah.
You have so many dealers have so many things to do with the deals that exist that they only have a limited time to go out and prospect. So you really have to be efficient. So one of the things that I've started to focus on in all the trainings that I do is having a 3 or 4 process where you mentioned the word cycling, where they all kind of work together in that same effort.
Yeah.
And those 3 things for me lately, you can interchange it some, but basically it's those prospecting efforts, the follow through that takes place, or follow up as most people refer to it as, with either those customers or prospects, depending on where they are. And then adding a third component to that, which Ken has been on for years, and we've seen be so successful. And that is getting involved with networking and other groups to fuel those things in a kind of a continuous circle.
Sure.
And be able to check multiple boxes with the same effort. Which is, we spend a lot of time talking about that anytime I'm speaking, say at a truck club or something similar like this, or our boot camps. And then the technology piece that you mentioned that comes into play is, if you have the tools to make you more efficient in doing that from an organization standpoint or a marketing standpoint, like, it used to be, you would go through and shoot a walk around video, for instance, where it would be 6 or 7 minutes long, and you would go through all those transitions. And now with things like kind of that TikTok feel, you can do 1 minute at one station, 1 minute at the next station, all that. And you can do that in a way where you do every vehicle that you do have on your lot, even if it's sold, just jump and do a quick walk around. And now you have a library to be able to share with your prospects whenever it comes up as a resource. So we spend a lot of time looking at those things to not only allow you to do those different components, the prospecting and so on, but do it in an efficient manner to where you're not overwhelmed from a time standpoint.
That makes a lot of sense. And you said a couple of things there that really struck a chord with me. First of all was, doing those things that are efficient and check many boxes. And the other component, you talked about the library of the videos and so forth. Something else I've heard quite a bit lately in particular is merchandising. And merchandising can, of course, take many different forms. But a lot of those types of videos, if you think about it, that's really another form of merchandising the inventory you have on your lot. And the fact that if a commercial manager is, having his team go out and record a bunch of those walkarounds, theoretically, with technology today, it should be really quick. If you've got a prospect that's interested in a, specific, hey, I'm looking for a stake bed or a, refrigerated truck or whatever the case might be. Oh, geez, I've already got a nice walk around. Let me shoot that over to you. And next thing you know, you're having a terrific conversation and hopefully helping that customer find what it is they need to run their business.
Right.
So,
yeah. I remember a few years ago, pre-COVID, I had a dealer that said they didn't want to go shoot a walk around because all they had on the lot at the time was sold units. And to me, I'm thinking, Okay, sure. Maybe they're, you have to do it in a certain way if they're
Right.
protective or whatever. But at the same time, if you have somebody asking about a specific component
Mhm.
and they just want to see it,
Yeah,
let them see it.
I agree. And you're really upfront. Hey, here's one that's already sold, but this sounds like what you're talking about. Let me make
Yes.
sure, and then we can figure out how to get that vehicle for you or
Yeah.
a very similar one. Yeah, makes perfect sense. Okay, love it. Going back to I guess technology a bit. How about let's talk about for just a second maybe the front end of that, if you will. So getting somebody interested, before you're even having the conversation. Having been around you and Ken and worked with you guys and read a lot of the information you've published and so forth. I think that's also part of it from making sure that the vehicles are out there on the website and you mentioned it a minute ago, networking, going to these events and so forth. What's your advice there for somebody in the business to make sure, again, that you're being as efficient as possible and also using the technology that's available to help you?
Well, I'll tell you something that Work Truck Solutions has really done a good job, I think, of trying to think of the right word here. Just getting things done in the right way. I had the opportunity to watch Brian St. Hilaire.
Mhm.
We were both speaking at a truck club a few weeks ago, and he talked about tying in your previous thought of the merchandising, but then also using the technology to be more efficient on the front end. And one of the exercises that coincidentally we take our boot campers through is we actually have them audit we don't do audit their own website. They audit a partner's website.
Okay.
Where they go in as if they are a customer,
Oh, yeah.
not only trying to find a vehicle, because everybody's going to do that. And Work Truck Solutions is really the best at that, at getting that process very efficient. But also, can you find the person that you're going to be talking to?
Ah,
And that is a total wild card. There are a lot of dealerships that do a really good job with that, but there are just as many who don't.
okay.
And so many will call in and I say that in that it may not be as easy to find, say, a fleet or commercial person.
Mhm.
Who knows whether or not they actually have a picture, proper contact information, if the phone numbers are right. Now, generally speaking, if they're gone to the Work Truck Solutions inventory page, they're going the right places.
Yeah.
But what if for some reason they don't get there?
Sure.
We do see a lot of dealerships. I won't name a manufacturer, but it's pretty common among at least two of them, where they'll have a Work Trucks tab, which will be Work Truck Solutions.
Yeah.
Then they'll have a commercial or something similar, and it'll be the general kind of manufacturer commercial page that you'll have to sort through as if it was retail inventory styled, but
Yeah.
with commercial vehicles.
Yeah.
So in answering that question kind of a long-winded way, as you've experienced, if that person who's visiting your site to try to find that right work truck is having to jump through hoops,
Mhm.
how long are they really going to stay?
Right.
And furthermore, even if they do stay, even if they do find the right vehicle, if it takes them a while to get there, they could be a hot buyer because they really need to look for it and they're invested. But more than likely, this as a consumer, so do I, anybody else listening to this, if you're having to jump through hoops to get to the product that you're looking for, do you really trust the efficiency of the rest of the process?
Yeah.
That's a gamble.
Mhm.
So we spend a lot of time on that. Brian did a really nice job, like I said, at a truck club we did recently, kind of laying that out in kind of a quick, concise form. And we've compared notes on going through that in detail. And that's something that we roll out quite a bit that people have a lot of fun with.
Oh, yeah, I would think so. It's a little, especially if you're typically on one side of the equation, and now you say put yourself in the other person's shoes and pretend like you're the buyer.
Mm-hmm.
That can be kind of fun, and also I imagine very eye-opening.
It is, and we never have them do it where they're checking their own.
Sure.
Because you kind of intuitively know where to go or where not to go, right?
Mhm.
So we pair them up and have them go back and forth, and hey, find a 2500 service body with X upfit on the back kind of thing, and then go find the person that you're going to call. Can you do those two things?
Mhm.
And by the way, chart your clicks, because obviously that's a Work Truck Solutions thing, right?
You
How
bet.
long does it take? How many pop-ups do you have to eliminate before you can actually use the website?
Right.
Things like that.
Oh, good stuff. And there's two things that I guess jump out to me as you were talking through all that. First of all, is you just said it, the number of clicks, or how easy is it to navigate and find what you're looking for? Because buyers of work trucks, they're generally, if it's a small to medium-sized business especially, they're out doing the job and probably on their phone in another truck, hey, I got to find an additional one. We just got this new big, I just won this bid and I need more vehicles. I don't have a lot of time. I'm eating my lunch in my truck and trying to do it real quick.
Right.
It's got to be fast and easy. And the other part of that really stood out to me is this business is relationships. So the point you made about, can you figure out who it is you're needing to talk to, I think is pretty important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to add one more point to that.
Yeah.
You'd mentioned about, eating lunch in the truck or something like that. We're all busy people these days. And let's say, for instance, it takes a business owner. I know you cut this down quite a bit, but let's say it takes 10 clicks to get to the truck that you're wanting. Okay. And it's that person's first time on your website.
Yeah.
They've got a general idea where they're going, but it's still new, right? What are the chances something's going to interrupt them in that process? And then they never get back to it, right?
Yeah.
Could be an email where something went wrong. Maybe they're working from home and a kid comes in. Maybe, somebody calls. So if you can shorten that process, you can't really track that, but trust me, you're winning if you make that efficient.
Yeah. Boy, that resonates. I mean, I can tell you, working from home, not even my own business, but just working from home, there's always, it seems like, something that can pop up. Next thing you know, you're, oh, gee whiz, where was I? What was I working on? And,
yes. And that's it. It's that attention loss, that getting back to it, that's a total wild card.
You bet. Really good point. Okay. It's been a great conversation. Some real world stuff, and I think that's pretty important, because that's where we live, right? We live in the real world, and we have to make sure that whatever solutions we're talking about solve those real world problems. So to that point, what's the final thing you might leave us with today of, if you do one thing, here's what it is, and maybe a second part to that question, what's your prediction for the next 6 to 12 months? What do you think is going to be most important going forward?
Well, you hit on a key word that we certainly preach all the time, and that's relationships. And I'm big on, not necessarily buzzwords or pet phrases, but I'm a big John Wooden fan, and John Wooden always called them maxims, right? And I call Ken Taylorisms. So it's very similar things, but I can really boil it down to one word that is truly my favorite to push anytime we're in teaching. And anybody that's heard me knows this, and that's resource. Can you be a resource for as many people as possible? That's something, whether it's, hey, I need information on a vehicle, I need information on an association. Can you help me with getting into details on when I should cycle out my fleet? All kinds of options. That the more resourceful you can be to as many people as possible, you have a good chance to build those relationships to where it's going to be hard for other competitors to come in and break that. So, but you have to have value with that. And that's where the resource component comes in, more than just relationships. So that's something that we try to have all of our people focus on. And then as far as the next 6 to 12 months, I don't know if this is so much a prediction, but a wish. I would really like to see a balance come back into play, where it feels a little bit, the supply and demand are a little bit more normal. We can get back to, less extremes on whatever side it's going to be. Because I feel like, just as an observer of this industry, we probably haven't had any 2 years of the same for probably 6-8 years now, something like that. I guess 21 and 22 maybe were a little similar, because it was, that kind of coming out of COVID area. But other than that, it's been, what's coming next? Yeah. So I hope that it's a little bit more balanced and normal.
Well, I hope that becomes a prediction and you're spot on with it. That, I think we would all like to see that. So
yeah, no doubt.
Will Brogan from Commercial Truck Training, powered by OneNexus, to use your word, thanks for being a resource for us today.
Absolutely.
And I have to believe that anybody watching this probably took away a few really good nuggets. So thanks so much. We enjoyed it.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Will.
Appreciate it.